Want to make an impact? Don't shout. Don't explain. Don't show off. Hold back your coldness, your silence, your calculated calm, and you'll become something others can't understand, yet can't ignore. In this video, I'll reveal 9 things you must never do in public if you want others to respect you, fear you, and never underestimate you again. These aren't moral lessons, they're strategies. And sometimes, they'll make you misunderstood. But you don't need to be understood. You need power. When you speak your pain, you surrender your power. Public complaining is one of the fastest ways to lose respect without even realizing it. We've all seen it, someone venting loudly about their boss, their relationship, or their struggles, thinking they're being authentic. But authenticity without discipline isn't strength, it's leakage. Machiavelli would consider this a rookie mistake. Complaining in public does 2 dangerous things at once. It reveals that you are not in control of your environment. It signals that you expect others to care. And those 2 things are deadly for anyone who wants to cultivate power. In reality, no one admires someone for suffering out loud. They pity them, then label them as emotionally leaky and unfit for pressure. You don't inspire confidence, you inspire caution. People begin to avoid you not out of cruelty but because they now associate you with burden. Power attracts those who endure pain without making it anyone else's problem. If you want to hold influence, you must hold your pain like a secret. When you hurt, stay quiet. Let others wonder why you're not flinching. Let your silence confuse them. This doesn't mean you can't feel. It means you don't weaponize your suffering for sympathy. Machiavelli wouldn't have called that vulnerability, he would have called it voluntary exposure to attack. You become what you repeatedly say you are. Say, "I'm exhausted too often," and people will stop counting on you. Say, "I can't handle this," and soon no one will trust you with real stakes. Complain often enough, and people will treat you like a liability. And here's the cruel irony. The more emotional support you ask for in public, the less of it you'll receive. Not because people are evil, but because they instinctively protect themselves from the energy of decay. Confidence is not the absence of insecurity. It's the discipline of not exposing it. We've all said it before. I'm not good at this. I struggle with confidence. I just don't feel capable. And we say it hoping others will reassure us. But Machiavelli would call this a strategic disaster. Because once you admit doubt in public, people don't just hear it, they adopt it as truth. They stop looking at you with curiosity and start viewing you through a lens of limitation. Even if you're capable, even if you improve later, the damage is done. You've told them how to treat you. Power is perception, and perception is shaped not by what you hide, but by what you fail to hide. When you say, "I'm not good at this," what they hear is, "Don't trust me." When you admit, "I'm insecure," they register, "This person will fold under pressure." People don't look for truth, they look for patterns. If you repeat a weakness, you've given them a pattern and that becomes your identity. This doesn't mean you lie about your ability. It means you never volunteer your fragility. True strength isn't pretending you're flawless. It's mastering strategic ambiguity. You don't say, "I don't know what I'm doing." You say, "I have something in mind." You don't say, "I'm nervous." You say nothing and let your stillness confuse them. You'd be surprised how far a strong posture and an unreadable face can take you. Machiavelli didn't need to be the smartest in the room. He just needed the room to wonder what he was thinking, and that wondering, that tension is the foundation of psychological control. Loud dreams die young. Silent ones grow roots. There's something deeply addictive about telling people what you're about to do. I'm building a company. I'm writing something big. I'm going to change everything. It gives us a sense of momentum, as if the act of announcing is itself a step toward success. But it's not. In fact, the moment you start broadcasting your plans, you trade away one of the most valuable assets in strategy: invisibility. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. Power doesn't need applause while it's being built. Real power hides its construction site. When you reveal your intentions, you do three things. 1. You expose your vulnerabilities. People now know your timeline, your goals, and your potential weak points. 2. You invite envy and sabotage. Competitors start calculating ways to block you before you begin. 3. You drain your own drive by seeking validation instead of building discipline. In the age of constant status updates, silence is an act of rebellion and a strategic edge. Everyone else is bragging, posting, preaching. Meanwhile, you're moving quietly, stacking wins, sharpening tools, becoming undeniable without ever being obvious. Imagine entering a room where everyone remembers what you've built without ever hearing you talk about it. That's not modesty. That's lethal discretion. Announce nothing. Let your success speak so loudly that you never have to. When asked what you're working on, say, "Nothing worth mentioning." Yet, say it with a smile that hides the storm behind your eyes. And remember, loud plans are fragile. Quiet plans become forces of nature. You don't need the world to know what's coming. You need the world to be shocked when it hits. Taking a side in a petty war is the fastest way to earn an enemy and lose control without gaining anything in return. Machiavelli warned rulers, never involve yourself in small disputes unless you have something to gain. That warning wasn't just political, it's psychological. Most people jump into arguments to prove their values, show loyalty, or demonstrate passion. But Machiavellian strategy demands something colder: detachment. When you pick a side in public, especially in trivial matters, you signal too much. You reveal your emotional triggers. You show your loyalties prematurely. And worst of all, you create unnecessary enemies. You might think you're being honorable, but in the power game, honor without leverage is suicide. Because once you tie yourself to one side, you've alienated the other. And unless you win decisively, all you've done is reduce your options. A ruler doesn't take sides. A ruler watches, remembers, and positions. Let the others argue. Let them bleed ego and emotion. You remain quiet, calculating, unreadable. Your silence becomes a mirror. People see what they want in you. That's the point. Because in neutrality, you stay dangerous. No one knows where you stand. No one knows who you're with. That mystery gives you leverage. And when the dust settles, you haven't exhausted yourself or burned bridges, you've preserved your influence. Machiavelli didn't suggest you don't care. He suggested you don't reveal that you care until it's strategic to do so. More importantly, when you avoid public tribalism, you earn a priceless label. He's not easily swayed. And that alone makes people curious, cautious, and eventually respectful.
The one who seeks attention becomes disposable. The one who draws it without trying becomes magnetic. There's an unspoken desperation in the way some people enter a room. They laugh too loudly. They compliment too often. They interrupt, joke, linger too long each move. A subtle cry, "Notice me." Machiavelli would not only recognize this desperation, he'd weaponize it. Why? Because craving attention is a declaration of weakness. It says, "I need your validation to exist." And nothing invites manipulation faster. People think they're being charismatic, but Machiavelli would warn, the moment people sense you want to be liked, they stop respecting you. You become entertainment, not influence. There is a massive difference between commanding attention and chasing it. The first is earned. The second is begged for. Consider the loudest person at a dinner party. They're constantly speaking, always filling silence, nervously laughing at their own jokes. At first, people look, but soon, people stop listening. Why? Because there's no gravity in someone who floats toward every spotlight. Now, picture the opposite. Someone enters quietly, no announcement, no exaggerated greetings. They take their seat calmly, they speak when spoken to, but when they do, it's measured, deliberate. Their silence is not emptiness, it's suspense. Machiavelli would say, that person has power. Why? Because people are naturally drawn to what they can't define, and the disinterested figure is the most alluring of all. Humans chase contrast. In a noisy room, The one who says less stands out. In a group of performers, the person who observes becomes the gravitational force. And that's what Machiavellian positioning is about, becoming the one people adjust around, not the one who adjusts to everyone else. Here's the rule. The moment you need the room, you lose the room. This applies everywhere from dating to leadership, from business to family. The more you signal, "Please notice me," the more replaceable you become. But the more you act as if their attention is optional, not required, the more valuable your presence feels. It's not arrogance, it's psychological scarcity. When you're slightly detached, slightly less accessible, people begin to project depth onto you, and they chase what they think you might be hiding. Attention, when chased, escapes. When ignored, it follows. People don't fear the person who fights, they fear the one who never flinches. Pressure reveals. Under stress, most people leak micro signals. A twitch in the eye, a clenched jaw, a shift in tone, a slightly raised shoulder. These signs are small, but Machiavelli knew they're fatal. The moment you reveal stress, you're no longer controlling the narrative. The crowd senses you've lost your internal grip, and they adjust accordingly. You're no longer the calm one they orbit. You're now the one reacting to the storm instead of being the storm itself. Machiavelli never cracked not because he had no fear, but because he never showed fear. Even boiling inside, his exterior stayed like iron, still, smooth, unreadable. Here's what he understood. Public pressure is never just about the moment. It's about how you are perceived handling the moment. People don't remember your argument. They remember if your voice trembled. They don't recall your defense. They recall whether you blinked too often. Your posture becomes your myth. So how do you survive pressure like a Machiavellian? You develop pre-planned stillness. You rehearse non-reactions. When insulted, pause. When interrupted, smile faintly. When attacked, tilt your head. Say nothing. These micro delays destroy the tempo of your aggressor. They expect reaction. When it doesn't come, they collapse into their own panic. You must train yourself like a weapon. Every movement, every breath, deliberate. Do not try to win the moment. Win the memory. Because when the dust settles, the one who appeared least disturbed becomes the one everyone remembers most vividly. This is why kings used to practice how to sit, how to walk, how to breathe under threat. Because posture under pressure writes your legacy. When you break emotionally, physically, or social, people remember. But when you absorb pressure without signal, you become a monument. And monuments aren't made of words. They're made of stone. The one who talks the most loses control first. There's a subtle death that happens when you explain yourself too much. It begins the moment you feel the need to justify your actions to others, not for clarity, but for approval. In that moment, you've already surrendered control. Machiavelli didn't believe in explanations. He believed in direction. The moment you feel pressured to defend, to clarify, to appease, you're no longer leading the room. The room is leading you. Let's be clear. Explanation is not always weakness. But public over-explanation, especially when done reactively, signals something worse than failure. It signals uncertainty. And in the court of perception, uncertainty is treason. Why? Because your audience isn't listening to your logic. They're reading your energy. If you seem tense, they assume you're guilty. If you rush to explain, they assume you did something wrong. If you sound nervous, they don't hear your words, they hear weakness. And once you've shown weakness publicly, people stop thinking of you as a source of authority. Instead, they begin trying to correct you, challenge you, reshape you. You become part of the conversation you once controlled. Machiavelli's tactic? He rarely answered directly. Instead, he redirected. If someone confronted him, he'd say, "Perhaps you misunderstood me." If they insisted, he'd add, "Or perhaps you understood me perfectly." Either way, the control was never in their handset, was in his. Why does this work? Because now, instead of defending yourself, You're forcing them to question their own perception. That's psychological aikido. You use their pressure to unbalance them, not yourself. And in that silence, in that gap between their accusation and your non-response, that's where you regain dominance. Think about real-life examples. A CEO who issues a panicked press statement sounds guilty, no matter what they say. But a leader who says, "We'll evaluate and respond when we have clarity," suddenly radiates calm on, therefore, strength. Over-explaining is also a form of neediness. It says, "I need you to understand me so I feel safe." And once again, we return to the golden rule of Machiavellian psychology. The person who needs less controls more. So what should you do instead? 1. Speak less. Let people project meaning. 2. Answer with questions. If someone demands clarity, ask, "Why does that matter to you?" 3. Use final statements. "It made sense to me. It was necessary. We'll see how it plays out." 4. Own the frame. When you're calm and minimal, the conversation adjusts around you. Silence is not just a defense. It's a weaponized pause. The more people try to decode you, the more power you gain. Here's what most don't realize. In public, the less you say, the more they fill in the blanks. And people don't fill blanks with boring assumptions, they fill them with mystery, significance, and depth. Often more than you deserve. And that's the point. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be interpreted as powerful. So next time you feel the urge to explain your choices, pause. Let the silence do the talking. Let your stillness become the narrative. Because those who don't explain themselves don't just escape criticism, they create legend. Rejection only weakens you when the world sees you bleed. It happens to everyone. You get overlooked, excluded. Someone chooses them instead of you. You were left on read, passed over for a promotion, ghosted, replaced. And inside, it burns. You want to lash out, to say something, to let the world know you noticed. You want to post that bitter status. You want to look directly at the person who excluded you and say, "I saw that." But Machiavelli would call that emotional suicide. Because here's the brutal truth. The moment you publicly show that you're wounded, people begin to view you differently, not with compassion, but with downgraded estimation. You go from being perceived as poised, mysterious, elevated, to someone who notices rejection and worse, reacts to it. And once people know that rejection affects you, they know how to control you. What you must understand is that bitterness, especially visible bitterness, invites the audience to interpret your pain as proof of lower value. Even if you were wronged, even if the rejection was unjustified, the story people tell themselves is simple. He must not be as important as I thought if being left out bothers him this much. But what if you didn't show it? What if your response to exclusion wasn't emotional, sarcastic, or fake happy, but silent and surgical? What if instead of a Facebook rant, you just vanished? What if instead of trying to prove you didn't care, you just didn't respond at all? That's what Machiavellian mastery looks like. Detachment as domination. Here's how it works. 1. Someone cuts you out. 2. You don't flinch. 3. They street art, wondering why. They expect you to chase, to ask why, to make a scene. When you don't, they become uncomfortable. They start thinking, did I just lose something valuable? Did he know something I didn't? Was that person more important than I realized? Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects their own insecurity. And that is power. It's tempting to get passive-aggressive, to drop hints, to make subtle posts online, to make it obvious that you notice their slight and are trying hard to pretend you didn't. But all of that is noise. And noise is emotional taxation. It drains your credibility. It tells the world that you are still attached to people who are no longer thinking about you. Instead, master cold exits. Not in anger, not in revenge. In refined, unreadable retreat. When someone rejects, you disappear from their radar without spectacle. And here's the twist. When you remove yourself without reaction, people don't feel victory. They feel discomfort. You didn't argue. You didn't beg. You didn't try to get them back. You just left. And in doing so, you become an unfinished story in their minds, the kind that plays on loop. This tactic isn't about pride. It's about optics and leverage. When you're indifferent, you're unshakable. When you're bitter, you're readable. Machiavelli believed that the strongest response to disrespect is absence. It removes your energy from their space. It reclaims your psychological ground. It rewrites the power balance not through retaliation but through reduction. You become the resource they no longer have access to. And scarcity, once again, becomes magnetism. Let them notice the silence. Let them feel the absence. Let them wonder where you went and why they feel emptier now. Because if you've built yourself right, your silence will sting more than your words ever could. You don't fight lions in the open. You wait until they're asleep or wounded. There's a dangerous urge that lives inside everyone with a sharp mind and a sharper tongue. The desire to call out the powerful when they're wrong. To expose hypocrisy, to strike with truth, to get justice. But Machiavelli would stop you. Not because you're wrong, but because you gain nothing and risk everything. Criticizing someone above you in public, whether it's your boss, your government, a mentor, or even a social figure, is not just risky, it's suicidal. Not morally, strategically. You may be right, you may even be admired, but admiration is fleeting. Consequences aren't. Here's what actually happens when you publicly criticize someone with more power than you. 1. People assume you're jealous, even if you're correct. 2. The powerful see you as a threat to be neutralized. 3. You become defined by your opposition, not your original identity. 4. You spark war without an army. This is a Machiavellian disaster. See, Machiavelli never advised submission. He wasn't soft. He was strategic. He understood that timing beats truth. That exposure is leverage, but only if you own the narrative and the conditions. So what should you do instead? Study them, quietly. Observe their flaws. Memorize their weaknesses. Build files in your mind. Then wait. You don't strike the powerful when they're standing tall. You strike just after everyone else thinks they've become invincible, because that's when they stop looking over their shoulder. That's when they get careless. And when you do move, you don't announce it. You don't shout it. You drop one perfect phrase in the right ear, at the right time, and let the rot set in from the inside. That's how you dethrone kings without ever raising your voice. Let others burn their credibility by attacking in public. Let them scream and get shadow banned, blacklisted, or shut out. You stay in the room. You remain invisible but present. There's a tactic Machiavelli used often, indirect criticism through others. He would guide the perception without being the source. He would allow someone else to say what needed to be said while he reaped the benefit of distance. You don't need to own every attack. You need to own the effect of the attack. Now, you may ask, but what if it's personal? What if I was publicly insulted? What if someone with more power disrespected me? Then your silence becomes your power. Don't take the bait. Don't try to win the public back. Don't chase dignity through reaction. You let the insult linger in the air, unanswered. Why? Because powerful people expect resistance, but they fear stillness. They expect you to lash out. But if you don't, they're left wondering, what is he planning instead? Stillness triggers anxiety. Silence breeds paranoia. And in that paranoia, your legend begins. You become the ghost in their mind. Machiavelli teaches us this final truth. The most devastating critique is not what you say. It's when you say what it costs you to remain silent until that moment. Public confrontation is tempting, but real power doesn't perform. It calculates. It waits. It lets the crowd praise the tyrant. It waits for the cracks. And then, with surgical precision, it applies pressure where it hurts the most when there's no escape left. So, next time you're tempted to expose someone above you, remember this. If you must strike upward, make sure it's not an argument. Make sure it's an execution. In public, you're not presenting a version of yourself. You're writing your myth. Everything you do in public is recorded not on camera, but in the memory of those who matter. Your allies, your rivals, your future gatekeepers. They're not watching your charm. They're watching your cracks. You think presence is built on visibility. It's not. Presence is built on what you refuse to show. Your pain, your fear, your need to be liked, your desire to belong. Machiavelli didn't want to be liked. He wanted to be respected in silence, feared in absence, remembered in myth. You're not just a person. You are a performance. You are an atmosphere. So the next time you step into a room, don't ask, how do I impress them? Ask, what do I withhold so they have no choice but to wonder? Because the ones who speak the least are often heard the most. The ones who reveal the least often haunt the longest. And the ones who need nothing from the room are the ones the room adjusts around. Walk in silence. Speak when it matters. Never explain, never chase. And when you leave, make sure the silence echoes behind you.